Intel has announced they're going to be selling their Folsom campus. And I'm getting a lot of worried calls from my clients in Folsom asking what this means for the Folsom housing market. Is the housing market in Folsom going to crash? Is there going to be a flood of new listings on the market to contend with driving the prices down? Or if I personally have been let go by Intel or I'm going to be relocated by Intel, what's the best choice to do with my Folsom real estate in regards to my relocation? I'm going to answer all of those questions in this video and back it up with data. So as is always my goal with this channel, you can make the highest quality real estate decisions you can from the comfort of your couch. Now look, I think the headlines have been a bit salacious here, and the question really is Intel actually pulling all the way out of Folsom? And I would say the answer is actually no, but more on that later. Let's get stuck right into the effects on the Folsom housing market of Intel shutting down their Folsom operations. Now in this video, I'm going to run you through the 4 criteria for evaluating the effect of any employer shutting down operations in any city and apply those to the Folsom numbers to see how Intel pulling out is going to affect the Folsom economy and the Folsom housing market. Now the top 4 criteria to do that evaluation are: number 1, is there going to be a massive loss in buying power from the laid off workers? Number 2, is there going to be less demand for relocating tech workers coming into Folsom because there isn't an Intel to employ them necessarily? Number 3, is there going to be a flood of new listings on the market that's going to put downward pressure on home prices in Folsom? And number 4, is there going to be a negative sentiment or some fears in the marketplace for people relocating or moving into Folsom now that there isn't an employer like Intel there? We're gonna go through all 4 of those so you can evaluate how this is gonna affect your housing. First off, before we get into the details and the numbers, I think it's important for us all to just take a deep breath. It's never as bad as you think, and it's never as bad as the legacy media tells you it's going to be. I've seen the craziest and most salacious headlines around this that make it seem like it's the end of the world for Folsom, and I think you'll see in a moment as I walk you through the data, it really isn't going to be that big of a deal. So Intel closing their Folsom campus makes for great headlines, it makes for great clicks for people, it makes for great salacious news, but it isn't really gonna have the impacts they're saying it's going to have. In fact, I think you'll see after we review the data that it's going to have a much smaller impact than you think, and those impacts are going to be really in niche parts of the market and not broad, sweeping, massive impacts on the Folsom economy or the Folsom housing market. Now, a major reason for the impact not being as big as they're making it seem like is because Folsom isn't Intel. That's not all it is. Folsom is an amazing place to live. In fact, Folsom is consistently voted one of the best places to live in California, one of the best places to live in the nation, and consistently voted one of the best places to raise a family. And it is not voted in any of those categories because of the presence of Intel as an employer. It's voted in those categories because it is an amazing, beautiful place to live with a high quality of life. You have Folsom Lake for all of your power boating, wakeboarding, fun on the lake, play down by the beach with the kids, fun summer times. You have the smaller lake, Lake Natoma, for all of your non-motorized boating, your paddleboarding, your kayaking, your canoeing. There's great recreation in Folsom. You have 50 miles of Class 1 paved trails connecting 48 developed parks in the community and connecting all of these beautiful tree-lined Folsom neighborhoods. It is a tremendously beautiful place to live and great for people with a family who want to get outside and recreate every single day. Folsom has so much more to offer than just Intel, and that's what makes it an in-demand community. Not to mention the shopping and the restaurants and the proximity to the broad and robust job market of Sacramento. So even if Folsom itself had no major employers outside of the shopping at the Palladio, people would still be flooding into Folsom because it is an amazing place to live. So as Intel isn't the major factor in driving people relocating to Folsom, it won't have a major effect on people relocating to Folsom in the future. Folsom is so much bigger and better than Intel. So again, I think we can take a deep breath and not stress about this quite as much as the news wants us to. So right about now, you're probably wondering who I am and why you should be listening to me about Intel, Folsom, real estate, or anything at all, really, and it's a pretty fair question. My name is Rich Curtis. I'm with eXp Realty, and I've been selling homes in this area for, well, not nearly 20 years. As of the recording of this video, I've been selling homes here for 20 years now. I'm used to saying nearly 20, but it's been a full 20 years now, in markets ranging from the Great Recession to the COVID market insanity and everything in between. My goal, as I said before with this channel, is to help you make the highest quality real estate decisions you can from the comfort of your couch. So to that end, let's jump right back into assessing the impacts of Intel pulling out of Folsom on the Folsom housing market. Now, all of that doesn't even take into consideration Folsom's amazing location. Just 25 minutes from downtown Sacramento, and as I said, that incredibly broad and robust job market, which in fact, Sacramento has one of the most broad and robust job markets in all of the state of California. And then it's right at the base of the foothills of the Sierra Nevada in some of the most beautiful parts of the state. So you can very quickly run up the hill for great hiking, whitewater rafting, skiing, snowboarding, all of that. Folsom is right there with access to the best of the best in Northern California. So even if Intel was pulling out completely right now today, which again, I'll explain later, that's not what they're doing. Even if they did, that's still not going to stop the flood of people wanting to move to Folsom, because Folsom is just a great place to be. So we're going to effectively evaluate the effects of Intel pulling out of Folsom on the Folsom housing market. What's the best metric to look at? Now, everybody always wants to look at prices because that affects the bottom line. But I think there's a more important metric to look at, although I am going to go over the prices with you, and that is months of inventory. So when it comes to months of inventory, if I say we have 2 months of inventory, that means based on the rate that homes are selling right now, if no new homes came on the market, within 2 months, I'd have no homes left to sell in Folsom. It's a very important metric because it, one, indicates who has power in the market, buyers or sellers, or whether it's a neutral market. It indicates the strength of the market. And in this particular case, one of the fears of Intel closing up and laying off a bunch of people is that there's going to be a flood of new listings on the market, thus increasing the inventory. In general, when the inventory comes up, it's basic supply and demand, prices tend to come down. And the inverse is true. When inventories are low, prices tend to stay higher. So we're going to look at a little bit of the data for Folsom to see how that's been affected. Now, to give you the 30,000 foot view, 3 months or less is considered a strong seller's market of inventory. 6 months or more of inventory is considered a strong buyer's market. And 3 to 6 months of inventory is considered that stable or neutral market sweet spot. Now, we've all just lived through the pandemic real estate insanity from March of 2020 all the way to July of 2022 when the interest rates adjusted and things slowed down. During that whole period, most of Folsom, all of Sacramento County, most of El Dorado County, all of it was 2 months or less of inventory, and for a large chunk of the pandemic, 1 month or less of inventory. And that was what was driving the crazy multiple offers, well over asking offers insanity that we all just lived through. However, coming out of the pandemic, once the interest rates raised in July of 2022, things eased, but just a little bit. We never, ever shifted out of a seller's market. So let's take a look at the data. We're going to pop up on the screen here the inventory graph for Folsom from December of 2023 through December of 2024, or it'll stop actually at November because the December numbers aren't posting on here just yet. Now, between December of 2023 and December of 2024, Intel laid off almost 900 people. Now, with their recent announcement of selling their Folsom campus, they said they're going to lay off an additional 270 to 273 people. So we've got about 273 getting laid off in this newest round, but over this last 12-month period, they had already laid off almost 900 people. So if all 900 of those people freaked out and put their house on the market on day one, we would see a big bump in inventory in Folsom. So take a look at the graph. There is no big bump in inventory over that year. As you can see, starting in December of 2023, we've got about a 2.1 months of inventory. Now you will see it sort of drop off and go down dramatically. That is an annual shift that always happens. Starting in late October, like right after Halloween, and especially right after Thanksgiving in late November, we see the inventory drop all the way until the second week in January, and then it starts climbing and the inventory gets more all the way till summer. That happens every year. On the right side of the graph, you can see that starting in about October, it starts cranking down to the right. That's normal. But as you can see, across the entire year, Folsom never really broke 2.1 months of inventory. And in fact, As you can see by the shape on the graph, every time it got to 2.1 months of inventory, buyers jumped off the fence, gobbled up a bunch of listings, and it dropped back down to below 2 months of inventory, and in some cases all the way down to 1 month of inventory. It would build back up to the 2.1 mark and get gobbled right up. So with the nearly 900 people who were laid off by Intel over the course of that last 12 months, we saw no appreciable increase in the amount of homes on the market or in the inventory level corresponding to those people being laid off. That is good news because they've only announced another 270 layoffs or so in this next round. So if the 900 didn't affect the housing market significantly, then probably the 270 aren't going to either. Now, that's not to say that this isn't horrible. It's horrible for these families who have been laid off. We've all been through lean times. We've all suffered job losses or layoffs, or someone in our family has, and it's a very stressful, hard time for these families, and my heart really goes out to them. But what the data is showing is it's not having a big impact on the housing market. So why is that? Well, because people have options. They don't freak out on day one when they get laid off and put the house on the market. A lot of these people are really highly skilled workers who can get hired back. So most of them take a deep breath. They have a severance package to live on for a little bit and they start applying for new jobs. In some cases, the company that laid them off will hire them back as a contractor without benefits, which is still rough on the family, but they maintain enough income to keep the house. In other times, they're being relocated and they might sell the house, but not all of them are going to sell at once. Or they might be relocated and they might choose to keep the house and rent it out. More on that later in the video. But what this means is there just isn't this massive wave of listings that hit the market and drive home prices down in relation to these layoffs. Okay, as I said, the other thing people worry about is that prices are going to come down. But what would really make the prices come down would be the inventory going up, which I've shown you didn't happen. So you probably already guessed it, prices didn't come down either over the last 12 months with the nearly 900 people being laid off from Intel. In fact, depending on how you cut the numbers up, Folsom gained between 1.9 and 3% in house appreciation, meaning the average home in Folsom is between 1.9 and 3% more now than it was 1 year ago. You can cut the data up a lot of different ways. Statistics isn't perfect. That's why I'm giving you a range there. But either way, whether it's 1.9 or 3, it's still going in the right direction. And that is up, not going down. So we can see those Intel layoffs didn't have any negative pressure on pricing. Now, is there maybe an argument to say that if Intel hadn't laid off 900 people, it would have gone up 4% or 5%? Maybe, but I don't think so because the inventory doesn't bear that out. There's no data to suggest that this really had an impact on the housing market at all. And that's because of the reason that I stated earlier. Folsom is bigger and better than Intel. It's so much more than Intel. It's just an amazing place to live. I get call after call all the time from people looking to relocate to Folsom because it's just an amazing place. And that doesn't change even if one employer pulls out. All right, if you've made it this far and you're getting anything out of this video at all, I'd like to ask you for a small favor. It's come to my attention that almost 90% of you watching these videos are not yet subscribers to the channel. So if you're liking this video, click the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Click the bell so you don't miss another video with crucial information to help you make your real estate decisions. Subscribing is always free. It really helps the channel and I'd greatly appreciate it. Now, let's get back to evaluating how Intel pulling out of Folsom is going to affect the Folsom housing market. So now let's go through those 4 factors to evaluate how any employer shutting down affects a local economy and see how those are going to play out in Folsom. Now stick around to the end because as I said, I'm also going to go over the fact that Intel really isn't pulling out completely and speak directly to you Intel employees as to what the best way to handle your real estate decisions are moving forward. But right now, let's jump right into criteria number 1 for evaluating how this is going to affect Folsom. So factor number 1 is the loss in buying power for the employees that have been laid off. Now look, when it comes to the housing market, the truth is most of these employees already own a home. I've personally worked with a lot of Intel relocations over the years and with Intel's relocation department, and the vast majority of people getting hired and coming into Folsom buy a home at that time. So when it comes to the housing market, have we lost any purchasing power in the housing market due to these layoffs? Probably not, because these are already existing homeowners. And if they're going to get rehired anywhere within a reasonable driving distance of Folsom, they're probably just going to keep the home they're living in and are happy with. And if they're going to relocate out of Folsom, they're going to sell their home, and their buying power doesn't mean anything to us still staying in Folsom. So we have not really lost any buying power when it comes to the housing market. Now, where have we potentially lost buying power? Well, in the retailer consumer goods market, we maybe did lose some buying power, or maybe not lost some buying power, but people are going to be spending less. They're definitely going to be spending less on luxury items and non-have-tos, and maybe keeping more money aside and keeping their powder dry to deal with an extended job loss or a relocation and the cost thereof. So yeah, is there maybe a little bit of money floating around the Folsom economy that has been pulled out by people kind of waiting and seeing what's going to happen in their lives when they've been laid off? Yes. Is that going to have a significant and measurable impact on the merchants in Folsom right now? I don't actually think so. The vast majority of these people are going to have some kind of a severance package that will allow them to mostly maintain their quality of life throughout the search period for several months while they try to find another home. So most of these people may not start any financial contraction unless it takes longer than they think to find another job. Most of these homes are probably two-income homes as well, meaning they still have another income coming in to help with the bills in the interim. So I don't think this will be a major impact, but it is a potential impact. Yes, it is, but it's not going to affect the Folsom housing market. All right, factor number 2, reduced demand from relocating tech workers. Is this really an issue? Well, I mean, it is going to happen, meaning our primary tech employer in Folsom was Intel. And if Intel's not hiring, we will have less relocating tech workers. So will that have an impact? I don't actually think so, for several reasons. Number one, over the last 12 months, it's not exactly like Intel has been packing on the new employees. As I showed you, they laid off almost 900 people over the last 12 months. During that time, it didn't really seem to affect the demand for houses at all based on the data that I've already shared. So Intel is already, at least for 12 months, and probably actually for quite some time before, been a non-entity in terms of increasing the amount of tech workers moving into the area. However, tons of people are still moving into the area, which means the people moving into the area probably aren't tech workers, or at least aren't all tech workers. And so this one really isn't going to have that big of an impact on the Folsom economy. In fact, I'll show you later how Intel isn't the biggest employer in the greater Sacramento area. It isn't even in the top 10, and it isn't even in the category of the fastest growing segment of the job market, which in the greater Sacramento area, it should be no secret, is healthcare. We are packing on major healthcare infrastructure all over the Sacramento Valley, and that is driving more relocations than tech workers. I cannot tell you the number of phone calls I received in December alone from nurses who have been watching the channel and are relocating in the Sacramento area to take healthcare jobs here. So this one, I think, is a non-issue for Folsom. Now, factor number 3 was a potential flood of new listings coming on the market due to the employees that got laid off, and thus increasing the inventory and driving the prices down. Well, I don't need to bury the lead here. I've already explained this one earlier in the video. That's a no. We didn't see an increase in inventory. We didn't see a decrease in prices, and that was with nearly 900 layoffs. So these additional 270 shouldn't really make an impact. Factor number 4 is negative sentiment in the marketplace. Are people going to feel negatively about Folsom, or be less likely to relocate to Folsom, or be less likely to commit the money to purchase a home in Folsom because they're now nervous about the future of Folsom because Intel has sold their campus in Folsom? And again, here, I think this is a big fat no. If you take a look at the chart on the screen here, you'll see a list of the top 25 employers in Sacramento. You will notice Intel is not number 1. It is not number 2. It is not even in the top 10. If you look at the middle spot, number 12, that's where Intel sits in terms of size of employer in the greater Sacramento area. Now, the 4 just below Intel, if you take a look at those ones, they are all healthcare companies. So as Intel clears out, as tech is taking a little bit of a back seat in the area, healthcare is coming on massively. We still have the largest and most diverse and most robust job market of any major metro in the entire state of California in the greater Sacramento area. So this one company, this one employer that sits in the number 12 spot is not going to have that big of an impact on the greater Sacramento area, and not on Folsom either, because everybody who lives in Folsom doesn't just work in Folsom. One of the great things about Folsom is it's a great commute location. In 25 minutes, you can be downtown at the Capitol steps, have access to all the political jobs, all the lobbying jobs, all of the state jobs, all of the restaurant jobs because it's the farm to fork capital of the state, one of the farm to fork capitals of the nation. You have all of the retail jobs and all of the arena jobs down there. So there is just a massive job market accessible from Folsom. They don't need the one employer, Intel, in Folsom to maintain their job status. So as I said earlier, in the legacy media, on the late night news, in all of the headlines, there's been a lot of teeth gnashing and pearl clutching and salacious headlines that Intel is pulling out of Folsom. And I'm here to tell you that's a little disingenuous. That's not what's actually happening here. Look, Intel's stock prices have been lagging and lagging quite a bit. In fact, they haven't even returned to their early 2000s level, and they need to satisfy their investors. They need to increase free cash on hand and increase profitability. So they've been laying off a lot of people. They've now identified the Folsom campus as one they don't need to continue to own. It is a very valuable piece of real estate in a very valuable town that is in demand, so that asset can generate a lot of income for Intel. So their plan is, in addition to the 270 additional layoffs, to sell that campus off. Now that will generate a lot of money, increase their profitability, and their hope is increase their stock price, satisfy their investors, start to get them out of this slump that they're in. Will that work? I don't know. That's for people smarter than me. But what I can tell you is, buried deeper in all of the news and articles about this is the point that Intel plans to lease back a large chunk of that campus and leave a large workforce still working there in Folsom for Intel on that campus, just not owning the building or the facility. So Intel is not completely pulling out of Folsom. They're laying off another 270 or so people, and I would imagine, unfortunately, and again, my heart goes out to everybody affected by this, probably a few more than that when it's all said and done. And they're selling the land, they're selling the buildings, they're selling off the property, but they're gonna lease a chunk of it back, they're gonna maintain a presence in Folsom, and they're gonna continue to be a Folsom employer, albeit a smaller one. So all of these impacts that we're talking about are lessened even more by the fact that this is not a complete pullout. So don't let the fear in the headlines freak you out here. Intel is not completely pulling out of Folsom. Now, could they? Could this be a stepped pullout? Or could all of the things they're doing not bolster their profits and not bolster their stock price? And could they have to lay off the rest of the people in Folsom and close the facility completely, which will be certainly easier to do if it means just breaking a lease and not having to sell off the land? Absolutely, anything is possible. And I don't understand enough about Intel's business to tell you what's going to happen in the future for Intel. But what I can tell you is we've already been through a whole year of Intel's retraction in terms of doing business in Folsom and employing people in Folsom to the tune of nearly 1,000 people being laid off, and it hasn't had a significant impact on the housing market in Folsom. So I would bet that if they, in the near future, shut it all down and pull out completely, it is not going to be the end of the world for Folsom. Why? Because, again, and I'm beating a dead horse here, but Folsom's just way bigger than Intel. It's an amazing in-demand place to live with 2 months or less of inventory, and that's not going to change no matter what Intel does. So look, does the average homeowner in Folsom really have anything to worry about based on all of this stuff going on with Intel and their business and laying people off and selling the campus and potentially pulling out of Folsom? I think the answer is no, you really don't. If this happens, even if the worst happens and Intel pulls all the way out, people are still going to be in a series of personal decision trees that allow the listings to hit the market in a slower, more moderated way. It's not going to be a big wave that tanks the housing market. And in reality, at just 2.1 months of inventory, Folsom could pretty well accommodate a significant wave of listings coming on the market anyway. So it's not something to worry about for the average person living in Folsom. Now to my Intel people, if you work at Intel, if you've just been laid off by Intel, if you fear you're going to be laid off or relocated by Intel in the near future, this is a major impact on your life. And you have some personal decision trees in terms of what do I do with my real estate? How do I begin to make decisions? So my hope is you find some work and get to stay in your home and continue to be a part of the vibrant, amazing community that is Folsom. Hopefully that's option number one, and you don't need my advice for that one. Now, if you have to sell, here's the good news. You're probably gonna be okay. That 2 months or less of inventory that I showed you means it's still a really robust seller's market in Folsom with a large buyer pool, which means if you need to sell your house today, you're gonna be fine. There's gonna be buyers at good prices for your home. Now, if you bought your home a long time ago, or if you bought with pandemic era interest rates of 2 to 3%, or you refied to 2 to 3%, you are probably sitting in a good position with equity and lower payments, and you'll be able to sell your home for cash out and go and relocate and do what you need to do. Now, if you bought in the last couple of years with higher 7 to 8% interest rates at these record high prices in Folsom, and you are forced to sell right now for a relocation, that one could be a little harder. You might, to be honest with you, lose a little money on that transaction. But are you gonna lose the plot? No. Are you going to have to be foreclosed on? Most of you, no. You might end up being a little negative on the transaction, but still able to walk, overall negative, and still able to walk away without losing the home or having major problems due to a forced sale because of relocation. So I think the vast majority of you are going to be okay. Now look, if you want an evaluation on your personal situation, feel free to reach out to me via the contact information on your screen or in the description down below. Like I said, I've been selling homes here for 20 years. I used to have an office on Folsom Boulevard, and I'm always happy to help. My heart goes out to all the families affected by this, and I'm happy to just get on the phone and give you some free advice and help walk you through your options. Now, one of your options, if you have that pandemic era interest rate of 2 to 3%, and you don't want to lose it, because let's face it, that was probably a one-time opportunity for most of us to borrow money at 2 to 3% in our lifetimes. I don't see it going back there. So if you want to keep that, we have another strategy for you where you can convert that home to a rental, pull a little bit of money out of it to buy your new home wherever you're relocating to. You'll have a blended rate between your 2 to 3% and the HELOC, and you'll have your new rate on your new home, and you'll be in still a better position than having to just get rid of the home and take on a new one at 7 to 8%. And then that rental can provide you some positive income and some wealth building opportunities in the future, which could turn this layoff into a real net positive financially for you in the long run. Is that technique right for everyone? No. So I have a video on that technique, who should use it, how to implement it, and you can watch that. I'll link to it at the end. So if anybody wants to look and do a deeper dive into that, you can watch that one. All right, that wraps up our discussion of Intel pulling out of Folsom, which, like I said, they're actually not really pulling all the way out of Folsom. I hope this has given you some crucial information. I hope it's really set a lot of your minds at ease. I hate the anxiety induced by the salacious headlines on the nightly news, and I wanted to give you some information to let you all know it's probably all gonna be fine and there's nothing to worry about. I hope this has helped you make some decisions. I hope this helped you feel more stable and secure in Folsom real estate. And if you want to go a little bit deeper and you do have to relocate and you want to check out that strategy of keeping your 2 to 3% rate and converting your original home to a rental, you can click this video right here, which will explain that to you. If you are relocating to Folsom, so you came across this video and you wanted to watch it to see, oh, wait a second, should I really relocate to Folsom? Yes, you absolutely should. It's an amazing place to live. And you can click this video right here for my pros and cons of living in Folsom, California. And if you want to watch Folsom compared to other towns in a head-to-head battle, you can click this playlist down here for my head-to-head town versus town videos. Now, as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for making it to the end with me, and I'll see you on the next one.